Welcome, everyone, to Buddha's Center. It's such a privilege to be here tonight with all of you. Let's begin by setting the most magnificent motivation in the universe, the one that we try to generate every single week. It's called bodhicitta, the mind that's defined by Lord Maitreya in the Abhisammalamkara as the altruistic intention to achieve the highest awakening, the highest enlightenment or Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. So let's begin with this magnificent motivation, the highest motivation in the universe, that says, I'm attending this teaching tonight in order to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, in order to learn exactly what I need to do in order to achieve the goals of myself and all other sentient beings. I'm here tonight to do that because the way that I can achieve infinite happiness and complete freedom from suffering is to generate this mind and follow the bodhisattva path. And the bodhisattva path begins by generating this mind that wants to become a Buddha day and night for the sake of all sentient beings. The objective is to become a Buddha, and the reason for that objective is to benefit every single sentient being in the universe, be the most reliable guide in the universe. So as we're generating this motivation, let me recite something from the King of Prayers, which kind of puts a seal on this motivation in terms of the teaching, that says from the teacher's perspective and then all of yours perspectives, because you're inviting all sentient beings to be your guest, you're hoping that those guests are able to hear the teaching that's being presented and are able to understand it in their own particular aptitude. So let's all generate this motivation that is the motivation of bodhicitta that says, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. And when I become a Buddha, I will know exactly how to teach these truths to sentient beings in the exact way that they need to hear so that they can evolve closer and closer to Buddhahood in dependence upon what I say. And this is something that only a Buddha can do because it's only a Buddha that can know simultaneously the minds of all sentient beings and simultaneously know what those sentient beings need and would, spontaneously, if the causes and conditions are there, uh, reflect that image to the body of water called sentient beings. And that image is only being seen by them because they have the conditions to see that image of the Buddha, or maybe not even knowing it's a Buddha, and to be benefited by that Buddha. And the Buddha knows exactly where, when, what time, place, and all that, that he or she can make that intervention, and it's spontaneous. There isn't any thought that goes into it. Just like a bodhisattva doesn't need to go through these steps that we're going through and saying, oh, okay, sentient beings are really great, and I depend upon sentient beings, and they're equally important, and they've all been my mothers, and it makes sense for me to love them, and I have compassion for them, and I want to remove their suffering. A bodhisattva doesn't go through that ritual. It's a spontaneous feeling that he or she has towards all sentient beings. And this is something that would only spontaneously happen without any kind of provocation or any reasoning behind it if there had been a conceptual kind of exercise that had been done that led up to a conclusion that that was the way that the mind should operate. So what we're doing over and over again in these teachings, what we're doing is trying to penetrate our minds with these ideas, to try to get our minds to align with things that make more sense than they do, and they make more and more and more sense. I saw a teaching by His Holiness Ling Rinpoche, the previous Ling Rinpoche, the senior tutor of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And he said, he was talking about exchanging self with others and talking about bodhicitta to a group of people. And he said, in this life, if this teaching can even put a dent, a little dent in your self-cherishing attitude, then I've done exactly what I've come to do. That's what these steps have really done their job. These steps of the equalizing, exchanging self with others practice and the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment that we go over and over and over again have really done their job. We're looking for these grand realizations, but If we're a little bit better than we were last year, then the teachings are working. We're evolving. Our proliferating Buddha nature is moving in the correct direction. It's maturing. It has the potential to mature, and we can mature it or not mature it. And if we can say that there's a dent in this self-cherishing attitude, we're a little bit better, then that means there's maturing taking place and we're evolving towards the Dharmakaya. We're evolving towards our mind having that kind of perfect wisdom, perfect love, perfect power, all of the perfects that come along with being a Buddha. And if we're changing slightly, it means that we're a little less not like, a little less not a Buddha, right? So if we can change slightly, then we're a little more like a Buddha. And then we change a little more and a little more and a little more. And before you know it, all of those changes come together as the exact number of causes that are necessary, the exact number of things that need to be removed are removed. And at that point, there's a blossoming of our potential. And this is what we're talking about. We're talking about our potential is perfection that can blossom by moving closer and closer to that ideal by creating causes that are concordant with that result, by removing the things that are inconcordant with that result and creating causes that are concordant with that result. So that this exercise that we're doing, where we say, may I become a Buddha, no matter how contrived it is, becomes less and less contrived and will become a main mind eventually that is supported by all the mental factors in good ways around it. But in the meantime, we have to do this in order for that maturation of our mind to take place. There's a lot of maturations of our mind that have to take place. There's maturing that must go on. And in order for the maturing of the mind to get to a place where you're a bodhisattva, there's a little more mature and a little more mature and a little more mature, and then you're mature and you're a bodhisattva. And there's levels of your maturity within the bodhisattva, and the most mature being in the universe is the result of the bodhisattva path, and that's the Buddha. So may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. I'm here tonight to attend this teaching to learn exactly what it will take to become a Buddha. Not what it, some of the things it will take, but exactly what will it take. So before I go any further, let's say this all together. May I become a Buddha to bring all sentient beings to the state of enlightenment. May I become a Buddha for the sake of every single sentient being in the universe to help them discover how to remove suffering and discover how to remove the obstructions to omniscience that inhibit them from experiencing exactly what we want and will have once we're a Buddha. That's freedom from suffering and infinite happiness and complete reliability. So now with that being said, I'll recite this verse from the King of Prayers that basically says, well, listen to what it says. In the language of the gods, Nagas, and Yaksas, in the language of demons and of humans too, and however many kinds of speech there may be, I shall proclaim the Dharma in the language of all. Lai ke dan lu dan no jin ke drobon da dan mi ke nan dan dro wa kun ji da nan ji tsam pa tan che ke du da gi ju den do. So, as we've said in the past, I don't know the language of gods. I don't know the language of Nagas, Yaksas, demons. I don't know so many human languages, right? I don't know how to speak. I mean, how many different languages and dialects are there within the human race that I don't know? There's even folks who speak English, who have accents that are difficult for me to understand. So, let alone beings in different realms who have completely different languages that I don't even have a clue about or wouldn't even have the basis if I were to try to find books in the library from which to learn their language. But it's a Buddha that knows all phenomena simultaneously and isn't inhibited in the way that I am because of my self-cherishing attitude at its gross and subtle level and my self-grasping ignorance. So I don't know what their languages are. I don't know where they're located. I don't even necessarily know that I could become those kinds of beings. And that's why it's so important that we like to talk about the second volume of the Lamrim Chemo. I love the second volume of the Lamrim Chemo. But what is an easy thing that can happen is we then find the teachings that are a little bit more comfortable to be the ones we focus on. And those things we find comfort in don't actually work and aren't even comfortable at all. But we don't know that because we haven't studied the prior material that gets us to understand that this compassion that we're having is related to some real specific kinds of suffering that we've become utterly convinced are disturbing. So, of course, when His Holiness the Dalai Lama explains the three principal paths, renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, he doesn't say, like, don't do anything with bodhicitta, just meditate on renunciation, and et cetera, et cetera. He isn't like this is the order in which you should do things. He says that all of these understandings enhance each other. You understand a little bit about emptiness. You understand about why people are kind of in the mess that they're in, and you're in the same mess that they're in. And there's an equivalency that is created there. And when think about other people's suffering and really see the diversity of suffering going on, it enhances your own renunciation. It says in the Lamrim Chemo that it's a misconception that bodhisattvas don't have renunciation. They actually have the highest amount of renunciation. So we see that all of these things work together to aid in each other. So I'm not saying just only read the first volume of the Lamrim until you've realized it. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is if you don't focus on the first volume, if you don't focus on the teachings shared in common with beings of small capacity and the teachings for beings of great capacity, medium capacity, shared in common with beings of medium capacity, then the teachings for beings of great capacity won't have any real frame of reference to invoke a feeling. The kind of things that you're thinking about in relation to others will be very weak and won't invoke this urgency to help them because you haven't invoked an urgency to help yourself. There isn't an urgency in your own mind about the disgustingness of cyclic existence and the need to get out as quickly as possible. This is where bodhicitta comes from. It comes from first saying, I want out of suffering altogether. And then there's a recognition that your own needs aren't fulfilled completely if you are only a hearer, solitary realizer, and you are not a Buddha. So it starts from this place that your own needs aren't fulfilled. May I become a Buddha? This is the first thing you're saying. You're going from renunciation, where you're finding cyclic existence completely disgusting, to this next idea that you have in your mind that this isn't even the best thing for me. This isn't the greatest, like even if I am relieved of suffering and have an abiding nirvana, this isn't really the best thing for me. So you have to start there. If you haven't even, Bodhisattva Shantideva in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life says, if you haven't even dreamed of your own suffering, how could you imagine others? If you don't know about your 8 sufferings and your 6 sufferings and your 3 sufferings, then you don't know what the object of observation of compassion even is. Because the object of observation of compassion is sentient beings experiencing among the 3 types of suffering. And we know the suffering of change, and the pervasive compounded suffering are those 3 types of suffering that we're talking about. And it's very, very subtle what we're really, really talking about. And that subtlety is understood with that third principal path, the emptiness. Understanding that the self-grasping ignorance is forcing us again and again and again into these aggregates, these contaminated aggregates among the 4 or 5 aggregates, these appropriated aggregates, We're being forced again and again and again into bases which have at least a continuation of a lack of freedom, or are actually involved in the suffering and the suffering of change. And I feel really fortunate tonight that, we're talking about things that are so important. When Lord Atisha used to ask folks, how's your mind today? Is your mind virtuous today? Instead of saying, how are you doing? I've thought about that a lot. Of course, your mind is the chief, right? Your mind is the chief that kind of decides how it all goes. But I think that there's something that is a little bit more to it than that, because normally I would say, hey, how you doing today? Oh, I'm feeling great. Oh, so you have the suffering of change. Good. Oh, I hope you have more suffering of change than you know what to do with today. Yeah, I hope you have contaminated happy feelings that serve as the bait that distracts you all day so that you think that samsara is awesome. I hope you're having a great day. Isn't that what we're usually saying to people? Oh, I had a great day. I went to the beach. I did this. I did that. I had a nice meeting with my family. I had a nice meal, blah, 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 blah. We went to a party. Aren't we talking about, like, I had actually a day full of suffering because it was a party in samsara. It was a Starbucks that was existing in jail, and I thought that I was free. And that Starbucks just made me like lose track of the thought that I'm not free. So it's really amazing that we have this opportunity to be able to change our discrimination to the point where we never have to discriminate things so wrongly that we experience the results of that wrong discrimination, because the Buddha has come to teach us exactly what's the correct mode of existence, not just about emptiness and inherent the mode of existence that cherishing yourself, that mode that you think is right is wrong. It doesn't make any sense. You're not independent. You're dependent on others. If you weren't dependent on others, if you were independent, it might make sense, but it doesn't make any sense. So we have all of these tools, the 7-point cause and effect passed down from Lord Maitreya, from Buddha Shakyamuni, of course, to Lord Maitreya and Arya Sangha, down through the extensive deeds lineage and the exchanging self with others practice, passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Arya Manjushri, to Arya Nagarjuna, down through the Bodhisattva Shantideva. We have all of these tools to try to turn the tugboat, this heavy, heavy thing in our mind around that's wrong completely. So it's not like it should be so hard to turn around. But since we've been habituated since beginningless time to all of these wrong concepts, turning it around is turning around like, oh, I've been thinking this way for a couple years. When you start thinking in a way for a couple years and then you kind of grow out of it, you can see, like, we're talking about what an impact, kind of like inappropriate thinking or thinking in a certain way can have on your mind, and it can last. Imagine if you've always only thought a certain way and it was always wrong, but you've not known any different. And trying to reverse something that made sense since beginningless time, and then today it's not making sense. So I've got beginningless time evidence I'm trying to fight up against with today's newly discovered thing that when I think about it, it makes me feel really uncomfortable because I think I'm the most important person in the universe, and you're trying to yank that out of me. And it's so logical, I can't help it, but it doesn't, like Bodhisattva Shantideva says that in a war, you're going to get hurt. Yeah, warriors get hurt, and it's not going to be like this beautiful, wonderful process of evolving and maturing where just every day is like dancing on clouds. It's going to hurt because you're recognizing things about yourself that feel so comfortable, and you have to realize they're uncomfortable at a layer that's so subtle. because they feel good. You have to somehow discriminate them in a way and recognize them as bait. So that's about how's your mind today? Do you are you checking? Do you know this is all bait? Or are you buying into all of this and wasting your time? How's your mind today? Not how are you today? Oh, I feel good. Well, that's the suffering of change. That's bait, and don't worry, you won't soon. And then when you don't, you'll be like, man, I wish I felt like that. And it'll serve as a reference point to make you feel even worse. Yet, just we get a little tickle, and that's all we need to be like, this is all okay. This is fine. This samsara thing, it's a problem, but I'll put it in this like a problem box. I'll do my life and I'll have this problem box that I call samsara, and I won't look at my life as samsara. And then when I'm, you know, feeling a little down or I don't have this tickle happening, then I'll open a book and I'll move over to this compartmentalized samsara and I'll look at it as if it's something different than what was going on a minute ago when I was eating cake. Yeah. And I think that this samsara is just my headaches and when people I love die. And then that might motivate me for a minute. And then as soon as that suffering's over, then I'm just back at it thinking samsara is awesome. And then if I'm acting like that about my own stuff, how would I possibly decide that when I see you drive by in a Ferrari, you are having a bad day? If that's how I operate. And as Acharya Dharmakirti says in the Pramanavartika Karika, that if it's just about like this evident suffering that we want to get out of that's propelling us into our practice, we have a bad thing happen in our life or a devastating thing go on, so it throws us into our practice. All it will take is for that to ease up, and then renunciation will be no more. And that's why real renunciation is related to the pervasive conditioned suffering that Acharya Dharmakirti points out and identifies the first noble truth. He identifies it as the pervasive conditioned suffering. Not that the other things aren't suffering, but the truth of suffering that we need to identify is that pervasive compounded suffering that's forcing us, again and again and again into these conditions. It's a condition for these other suffering of change and the suffering of suffering. And it pervades all of cyclic existence. And we don't have any freedom. If we have it, we're just at any moment ready to be thrust into something. Thrust, lack of freedom, forced by our karma, contaminated karmas, afflictions, and their corresponding seeds. Forced. If you're forced into a corner, how does that feel? If you're forced to go somewhere, you're forced onto a train. And it says in the text that it's like we're forced onto a train. The previous circle in Rinpoche saying it's like we're forced onto a train, and then like we don't even think about the fact that we're going to die at all. We just fall asleep like we're on this rail car, and then we just get to our destination, and we're like, oh, we're here. How did we get here? We die. We're on our deathbed. How did we get here? Well, you've been moving so quickly towards that since the last time I saw you. I say, hey, how have you been? What have you done since we've seen each other? You may talk about some practice because you're talking to me, right? And then you'll say, oh yeah, and then I had to take Aunt Tilda out to the diner, and then we, went over and we had a piece of cake and blah 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 blah. What did you do? What have you been up to? But you aren't going to tell me I've been moving closer to death. I've been disintegrating moment by moment. I'm this fragile thing that like a wristwatch that at any moment just a component's gonna just go the wrong way. Like a real component eye, like a wristwatch. Just one thing goes the wrong way and everything's gonna stop working altogether. Yet I don't feel like I'm this fragile water bubble that is talked about so commonly. I don't feel like all it'll take is just a simple pop or a thorn to bleed me out. I think that I'm this concrete thing that I can tell you all about. And I didn't think at any point in time during that week I was going to die that day. And because I didn't think any time during that week that I was going to die that day, I probably didn't do enough in relation to my maturing. You see how saturating our minds with all of this is so necessary if we're really trying to make any headway towards having compassion for others. We talk about compassion. We say, oh, I have love for others. I want you to be happy. That's love in Buddhism. I want you to be happy and have the causes of happiness. Compassion in Buddhism, I want you to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. But what are we talking about? What's the cause of suffering? Self-grasping ignorance. It's an ignorance that does not tally with reality. Wisdom is a discerning mind, which apprehension of the object tallies with reality. Oh, I want you to be free from suffering. Yet I don't even realize what your problem is if I don't know what mine is. If I don't know I'm being thrust by ignorance again and again and again into a set of aggregates, into bodies and worm bodies and dog bodies and human bodies and God bodies and hell bodies, if I don't know that about me, then when I say I want you to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering, I don't even know what I'm talking about. It doesn't even make any sense. Because according to Lama Tsongkhapa and the Lamrim Chemo, when I say that, I'm talking about knowing that you're involved with the three types of suffering. If I don't even know what those are, I can say I want you to have happiness at a real outer level. Like, oh, I hope you have the suffering of change today, right? I hope you're free from suffering. When I say that to people and I don't know about what Buddha came to teach, all I'm saying is I hope you don't have a headache today. I hope you drive a Lamborghini today. If I don't know that that's the suffering of change, if I don't know the highest bliss in samsara is the suffering change, of contaminated bliss in samsara is the suffering of change, and if I don't know at any moment that I could just literally, I could be talking. There was someone giving a lecture in India last year, giving a lecture and drop dead. I don't think that's possible. Maybe I do a little while I'm talking about it, but when I get off the talking about it, will I all day be motivated by this idea that death will come and nothing can stop it? I don't know when it's going to happen, and the only thing that can help is Dharma? Because that's what would get me to day and night want to get out of samsara, which is called renunciation. And renunciation has to be there for bodhicitta to happen. So anyway, that's my introduction today. I just wanted to emphasize this fact. We talk about bodhicitta, 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 love and compassion. But what are we really talking about when we say that? What's your problem that you have that I have compassion for? What is it that's wrong with the kind of happiness that you have that I want you to have happiness? Like, do I say that to people who are eating cake? I want you to have happiness in the causes of happiness. They're like, oh, no, I'm fine. My mouth's full. I'm happy. What would that, why would I even say that to someone eating cake? Why would I even think that about someone eating cake? They're happy, aren't they? Why would I even worry about my own suffering if I could, a great Geshe used to say that, it's kind of funny. They'd be approached. They were kind of like famous at the time, they'd be approached and say, isn't it silly that all these stars and people, are like coming around Buddhism these days? And, it's just like kind of in and trendy. And I think it was Professor Thurman or someone, I'm not sure 100%, said, they actually make the best Buddhists because they've done all the suffering of change and realized that it just doesn't work. You and I, we're just looking for another 10,000 bucks or so to make us happy. But they know that suffering of change is just bait and it never has been satisfactory. That's a lot. That's a lot to understand. Are we into Buddhism because we like the way that it makes us feel, or we like the fact that it can remove our ignorance? If we're just going to this center and that center and getting community and it's like we like the way it feels, we're going to Buddhist teachings to cause us to have the suffering of change. Why are we going to Buddhist teachings? Are we going to Buddhist teachings to figure out how to remove the pervasive compounded suffering? Or are we showing up because it makes us feel good and then we remove the suffering of suffering for a minute and we can hang out in the suffering of change? And it's actually bait. Are we actually entering Buddhist temples and taking the bait of samsara? Or are we entering there in order to know that the bait's bait and to get rid of the pervasive compounded suffering that has as its root the subtle, the self-grasping ignorance? And good buddy, the gross self-cherishing attitude. Yeah. But the self-cherishing attitude, even at its most subtle level, keeps us from the highest amount of happiness. It obscures the hearers and solitary realizers. They still have a subtle self-cherishing attitude. The obstructions to omniscience are those imprints, the stains of the self-cherishing are there as well, that are subtly and causing them to just be in an extreme of peace and be unfulfilled if you study it in a full way, unfulfilled in terms of their fulfillment. So we have to study. We have to study a lot. We have to know what's wrong with us. We have to recognize that we are ill. We have to rely on some sort of recognize we're ill, figure out what the cause of the illness is, achieve health through relying on a remedy. I mean, this is really it, the Four Noble Truths. Identify that we're sick, and we have to know exactly what we're identifying. And once we identify the problem of cyclic existence, then I can move from myself and say, wow, you got a problem, brother and sister. Yeah, you all have a problem. You don't even know it. Like it seems like a bigger problem because I know about it and you don't. It's a bigger problem for you. And you can see how then the compassion, it's not like I know what the problem is. I'm not saying I've realized emptiness even in a conceptual way. I'm just saying like I have an inkling that there's something going on that they don't. So it's even worse for them. And that's how you start to break down the barriers of bias with emptiness. And you start to see you need the emptiness in order to help, and in order to get yourself out of the suffering you need the emptiness. In order to help you need to know what's wrong. So all of these things work together as a complete package that allow us to figure out how to create the bases for the latter realizations. Teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity, the teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity, teachings for beings of great capacity, and the sutra perfection vehicle and the tantric vehicle. You cannot leave these out. You cannot just pick and choose what you'd like to do. The bodhisattva must have the pradamoksha basis. Not must, but is the best basis for the bodhisattva to have that pradamoksha vow basis. The basis of ethical behavior, the basis of the Vinaya, the basis of the, controlling with mindfulness and vigilance our body and our speech and our mind, being able to get that under control are the foundations for us to be able to then completely get under control and then be able to show others how to get under control. So imagine that all of those beings that have gotten under control, have gotten their minds under control. Our minds have been under control and we haven't had control of our minds. The Buddhas know the mind's under control and they have control of their minds. Imagine that those Buddhas that have removed the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience are in the space in front of us right now. Loving, caring, looking into our eyes like a mother does her only child, letting us know they're only here to help us. They're only here to help us learn how to discover the truth of suchness, how to discover the downfalls of the self-cherishing attitude, the benefits of cherishing others, how to discover bodhicitta, how to discover that things don't intrinsically exist, that even the compassion doesn't intrinsically exist. The person with the compassion doesn't intrinsically exist. The sentient beings you have compassion for don't intrinsically exist. Yet, they exist through mere imputation, in dependence upon a collection that serves as a basis of designation. And that is the correct mode of existence. This is an evolution of our mind that a lot of things need to get loosened. This idea that things are permanent when they're really impermanent needs to get loosened. This idea that happy things, like I was just talking about, are actually happy needs to get loosened because contaminated happy things are happy needs to get loosened because they're actually suffering. This idea that there's some kind of purity, that I think that I have, maybe a pure permanent self that I kind of have, or some kind of a purity, some separate purity, when there isn't that. There's an emptiness of that. This needs to get arranged. And this idea that I intrinsically exist, and I and mine intrinsically exist, and you intrinsically exist, and everything around me intrinsically exists. There's just so much to undo and undo and undo. And the coarser things are undone, and then the little less coarse things get undone. And then it works in that way. Even once you see emptiness, you have these big of the big things that get removed, and then the medium of the big things get removed that are wrong with your mind, in terms of the first the acquired afflictions are removed, and then the innate afflictions are removed in 9 different stages and levels and so forth. So you see how our mind matures. Our mind goes through this process of getting better and better and better. But we can choose to pause, or we can choose to keep moving forward. And the more we rely on the teachings of death and impermanence and recognize that death will come, nothing can stop it, the only thing that can help is Dharma, and start to realize today I could die, today I'll probably die, and if we don't end up dying at the end of the day, hey, it was pretty good. I thought I was going to die, and I engaged in virtue, so it was good either way. So we start to try to get this relevance in our mind that we can die today. And this develops a sense of urgency. And then we start to look at other sentient beings suffering, and recognize there's a sense of urgency. I need to start to work at these things. I need to start to become a bodhisattva. I don't know if in my next life I'm going to connect with these teachings. How will I know? How do I know if I'm going to have this opportunity? I know that I'm creating causes now, but am I so sure at the time of death that I'm going to force myself into a position that I can continue this? So those Buddhas are in the space in front of us, helping to guide us, to get us to be able to be comfortable and not worry. And they're only coming here in order to show me how to not worry, show me how to loosen those tight knots in my mind that keep me so sick, that keep me from really experiencing life in its fullest way. So those beings are in the space in front of us. Imagine Buddha Shakyamuni, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Chen Rezig in person. Imagine Namgyal Khensur Geshe Wangdak Rinpoche, inseparable from Arya Tara. Imagine Geshe Lobsang Gonpo Rinpoche, Dema Locho Rinpoche, Khensur Lobsang Gyatso Rinpoche, Geshe Dorji Damdul Rinpoche, Umse Geshe Agha Rinpoche, Jeffrey Hopkins Rinpoche, Genpo Dendrapa Rinpoche, Yeshe Yeshe Tapia Rinpoche, Lobsang Santen Rinpoche, all these amazing teachers that we have in our world or have had in our world that teach us all of these things to help us clean our minds up, to clean up the things that we don't know how to clean up ourselves. So we get taught how to clean them up, and then we know how to clean them up. And these beings are here for us to do that. Khenpo Palden Sherpa was in this world, was so Sewan, Khenpo Tsewan Dongya, all these incredible, incredible teachers who have affected my life. I pay homage to them, and any teacher you consider an enlightened being, and any that I missed, I apologize. I didn't mean to. I just missed all those beings in the space in front of you, and the extensive deeds lineage, and the profound view lineage, and the lineage of blessings. Imagine they're all in the space in front of you. Highest yoga tantra, action tantra, performance tantra deities, 35 Buddhas protectors, all the beings, all these deities are in the space in front of you. And they are all appearing in various manifestations to work with whatever the needs are, in my case of me, but of all sentient beings. And that's why you see the diverse forms of all the deities. Someone asked Rinpoche, why does Tara have all these colors? And Rinpoche said, because some people like blue, some people like red, and some people like green. That's simple. So the Buddhas will even appear in colors that appeal to us to try to convince us more. They'll do anything they can. They'll appear scary if they need to. They'll appear loving if they need to. They'll appear like a post office worker if they need to. They'll do whatever it is that they need to in order to help us mature. And imagine if you could do anything to help someone. If you could just turn yourself inside out and change colors and get extra hands if they needed 10 hands, or 1,000 hands or 100,000 hands. Imagine. Those are the kind of beings we're imagining in the space in front of us. Not a fictional being, actual beings that can do this. Beings that are only different than you because you and different from me because you and I haven't removed the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. If you are who you appear to be, Acharya Dharmakirti says, and the Buddha in the sutras says, don't judge other people's minds. You have no idea who's a Buddha and not a Buddha. And this is why, getting angry at someone's quite dangerous. So imagine all of those Buddhas in the space in front of us. And now we said, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. And I had the audacity to say that I'm going to, may I say this teaching in the language of all beings. Now, audacity because like I'm trying to imagine I'm doing it, but I'll be able to eventually do it. So it's not a silly thing to think. And a lot of athletes imagine their jump or imagine their exactly what they're going to do before they do it, and science shows that it makes you better at doing it. So that's what we're doing. We're doing logical things for logical reasons. May I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. We're doing a rehearsal here. We're in the cockpit of what are those things called? The fake plane. It's not a real plane. It's a anyway. It's called something I can't think of right now, but it's a simulation, of what you're actually going to do when you fly the plane. And you get in this thing and you practice it so that when the time comes, you actually, go out and fly the plane. And, in the meantime, you don't smash into, other planes or, things you're not supposed to smash into because you don't know how to fly a plane. It's a lot safer if you're in this kind of simulation that's still called something else I can't remember. But yeah, so this is what we're trying to do. We're inviting all sentient beings. We're inviting people who we find dangerous. And if we actually invited them in the room right now, we would get hurt. And we're not prepared to actually do that. But the way we're preparing to be prepared to do that. So let's do that. Let's imagine we bring every single sentient being in the universe here. We said we want to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. All sentient beings, how do they get benefited? They get benefited by hearing these teachings. So imagine if we want to become a Buddha for their sake, and if the Bodhisattva works for their sake, and the Bodhisattva knows that he or she is trying to always guide beings to the truth of suchness, then let's imagine that we bring every single sentient being here in the universe in a mental way. Friends, enemies, neutrals, friends, neutrals, enemies, in the order we see in the Lumrim, and have courage to do this and know that there's no intrinsically existent any of those things. And that people are under the sway of karma and afflictions just like us. Like we said, where lack of freedom is misery. All those mean people that we don't feel deserve to have happiness and be free from suffering are just as controlled by the terrorists of self-cherishing attitude and the self-grasping ignorances we are, and their manifestation of it is making them feel even worse than our manifestation of it is, probably based on the intensity that you see going on. So imagine that we bring every single sentient being here in the universe to be able to experience this, and that they connect with every one of the Buddhas when we do this. Not that we just bring them here and now it's like, okay, now we're just going to have this experience. Imagining that they're having this experience and we're rejoicing in the fact that they're having this experience. This opens up our mind. It removes the things that are in the way of us seeing emptiness. Doing stuff like this removes the things in the way. We have a whole bunch of boulders and stuff in the road to our emptiness, and those boulders are consisting of things that are, you know, minds that aren't tallying with reality, minds that are so fixed in certain ways that um, don't allow for us to see really subtle stuff. So doing this is removing those things, imagining and rejoicing in sentient beings. When we take the Bodhisattva vow, we says, you know, I go for refuge to the Triple Gem. I confess the misdeeds individually. I rejoice in the virtue of all the beings. I hold the precious Buddha in my heart. We're rejoicing in the virtue of all the beings. We're saying, oh, I want all beings to experience unlimited amounts of happiness and bliss. And the and when we're connecting our mind in that way, we're removing the things that are keeping us so constricted. So imagine that we bring them all here. They're all getting the same treatment that we are from the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have no bias. We have a little bit trouble bringing them here. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas say welcome when we bring them here. Look at how different we feel. Do you feel like a Buddha? Do you have infinite happiness and freedom and suffering? Never. The Buddha does, and the Buddha sees these beings all enter the room and feels equally loving and equally compassionate. We bring these beings into the room and we feel a stubborn toughness around certain ones. That difference is why we're not happy, why we're missing something all the time. That difference right there. And it's subtle. Once you get past the gross levels and you're like, I could really help, I'd be willing to help everybody. But you still don't really feel like that. To feel like that spontaneously, what would that be like? What could that be like? That I would lay my eyes on Lorinda and then lay my eyes on someone murdering someone that I love, maybe. And at that moment, not feeling any differently in relation to Lorinda or the person murdering someone I love, them, me wanting them to have happiness, and me wanting them to be free from suffering. Does it still sound easy? I would equally, someone's murdering someone I love and Lorinda's standing in front of me. Can I, at that moment, equally want Lorinda and the murderer to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering and have happiness in the causes of happiness? That's to be able to do that, to me, sounds like something that is such a stretch. Thank goodness we have this stretching teachings because, wow, for my mind, not that my mind would then not try to stop the killing. That's not what I'm saying. I mean the way that I feel about that person. And then I don't want them to create the killing, and I don't want them to suffer in the future. So, but at that moment, I'm somehow got to get to a place where I can equally discriminate those two beings. Wow. It's a tall order, right? Pretty tall order. Okay. So now, with that all being said, all of these tall orders being given out, usually when you hear the bodhicitta teaching, it's so fun. So nice. So nice to think about others and how I could change my perspective and I could care about your parts like I could care about mine. Just change that perspective up. I've changed it a lot. It's super easy, right? Oh, we're all important. We all want happiness. Yeah. My foot's different than my hand, and I take thorns out of my feet with my hand. Yeah. And then move on, and then bring that example back up again. Someone's killing someone that I love. Someone's beating my dog. I love my dog. We all know this. Someone's beating my dog. I'm trying to think of something that I would just like lunge at. Someone's beating my dog, and then in walks Lorinda, and I'm somehow supposed to equally want to benefit. That's where I'm supposed, according to Panchen Sonandrapa. Before I do any of the steps of bodhicitta and the 7 point cause and effect, I'm going to get to a place where I'll equally benefit, equally willing to benefit, open minded. There's no solidity, friends, enemies, neutrals. Wow. Space in front of us is changing into Rajagriha, Vulture Peak Mountain, where the Buddha came to tell us about something that could make all of this work and that could make it all okay and that could make it so that everything isn't really so intense because it's the intensity of it all is just made up by me because I feel like it's all coming at me when it's all coming from me. The world comes at me and I don't have any feeling that it's coming from me. And I'm not saying that the world is all contained in my mind like the mind only school. That's the nature that would be saying that everything's the nature of my mind. I'm saying I'm projecting it different. So the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge, the Buddha came to tell us about the mode of existence of all the things around us and ourselves that's accurate, and a mode of existence that's inaccurate. So the mode of existence that, when I say that's accurate, the Buddha doesn't come to say that things don't exist. The Buddha comes to say that things don't intrinsically exist. And this is something that's misunderstood a lot when people give teachings on Buddhism because they don't really read what the Buddha wrote. They read like, a little, like a paragraph or two, and they don't rely on anything else. And then they make their own conclusions. And the Buddha, 2,500 years ago came, and before that, there was no other history of writing on lack of intrinsic existence. So it was such like a groundbreaking thing that the Buddha brought to the world that we arrogant folks think that, oh, we could just discover it by reading a paragraph when all of these, Lama Tsongkhapa wrote 18, has 18 volumes, and the Buddha has, 108 volumes. If you saw the Chen Rezig Center, the Conjure, it's like a wall of books. The Tanjur, the 213 Indian commentaries. They weren't just all written because it's just so easy to get it. Things just don't exist. I just know things don't exist, then I don't suffer anymore. I know if I know I don't exist, why will I have a problem? That's not the subtlety that the Buddha came to explain. We won't really get into a lot about it tonight. But the mode of existence is emptiness of intrinsic existence. Things don't exist from their own side. I don't exist from my own side. You don't exist from your own side. Nothing in the universe exists from its own side. It doesn't exist independently. It's merely imputed in dependence upon a collection, if it's about a person, among the 4 or 5 aggregates that serve as a basis of designation. This imputed object, Jeff, when I look for it within this basis of designation, this Jeff name, we call it, we don't know it's an imputed thing really until we start to look for it. When I start to look for this Jeffness, this Jeffy, this Jeff guy, I just said that the person's merely imputed in dependence upon a collection of among the 4 or 5 aggregates that serve as a basis of designation. So if it's not just merely imputed, it must come from the side of the object. And if we're talking about person, what's the side of this object over here? Well, there's only 2 possibilities. It's got to be within my physical and mental aggregates or something that's separate from it. If there's this mode of existence that seems so pure and that seems so real. So when I come to see if there's something objectively from the side of this I, this object that I make all my decisions about and believe that, I need to take care of because it's true. When I start to check around for this I that appears naturally to me, but I'm super flexible about, like sometimes it's at the tip of my finger if I break it, and sometimes it's just something that exists outside and like drives around the tractor of my arms and stuff. Like there's an operator in there. I have all these ideas about myself. I believe that I exist in my parts sometimes, and I believe I exist outside of my parts sometimes. I believe that I'm the dependent on my parts, the dependee of my parts. I believe I operate them in some way. Oh, maybe. And then sometimes I think, oh, I'm just this collection of my parts, or I'm this special shape and configuration. But when I go to look at all of those seven kind of possibilities, or really the possibility within this physical and mental aggregates or outside, for this objectively existent true self, that it appears to me to have a mode of existence that is that. When I go to look for that, an objective thing has to be findable. And if it's only independence upon these parts that I can label myself as this or that, then if I can't find myself here or outside of here, I've got to come up with a way that I exist besides objectively when I come out of that ultimate analysis. It doesn't find this thing that I feel is there. You like think about it. Ha! When you're scared, you have, oh, I just got scared. Where is that thing? Where is that? Who is that? But you felt it. You feel it. If an earthquake happens, you feel it. Where is it? Locate it. It's so strong, and you make every decision in your life about it. Everything. This thing you know is there. It's right in here somewhere, or out there, but it's true. Yeah, we make everything up. And we feel there's a mode of existence over here that isn't, and then I feel that things outside of me have a mode of existence that don't have it. And then I think there's intrinsic difference between myself and the things outside of me. And then that intrinsic difference I see there's something outside of me, and there's an intrinsically existent thing over there that has intrinsic aspects that I need to pay attention to, and that I need to either, feel happy about, feel sad about, or feel neutral about. Because I need to make a decision one way or another, because there's something over there that intrinsically exists. So the inappropriate attention is making that decision, is coming up with conclusions based on a false premise that something intrinsically exists from its own side, and that I don't have anything to do with it. I think that it's sitting right there in the basis of designation. Yeah. The thing that I'm calling, the referent of my label, that thing over there, I think that label I'm saying is sitting inside the thing over there. And just the label itself can cause, just the label itself, like when I'm hungry, I can say pizza. I can hear that word and it can make my mouth water. We're so weak. We just hear a sound and physically we have a reaction. We hear a sound, someone yells at us and we sweat. We're so weak because we think that the words are intrinsically existent. So weak. And this is why the Buddhas are free. So with that being said, this very long introduction where we won't go much further than this, let's recite this Heart Sutra where we know explicitly the teaching, the intended subject matter is ultimate reality, the emptiness of intrinsic existence, and the explicitly and implicitly within it we find the teaching of the five paths, of the five Mahayana paths. Okay. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha, Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. And at the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita should see in this way, seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness. Emptiness also is form. Emptiness is no other than form. Form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease, no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no eye, dhatu, up to no mind, dhatu, dhatu of dharmas, no mind, conscious, dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance, up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times by means of Prajaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable true complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as truth. Since there is no deception, the Prajaparamita mantra is said in this way. Teata om gate gate paragate parasangate bodhisoha. Thus, Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family. Thus it is, O son of noble family. Thus it is, O son of noble family. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice when the Blessed One has said this. Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Kala jebe nejo damba ne ngushe du chu nga yi du du jen du baba lama yi bu shin zi ne zong gan do so la sha ze lo aga samara je san do samara ve ga samara je san do samara Agha samara jajandara samara evete aton kati kati paragati parasangati buddhizo ababa gonja sanjiga yedimi doji she lobadoji mebadoji shiwadoji jagi baje meduvision tanji sherin kori so agerin don jaje josho wadam medon bejen dandaro don tumba don jin won son son joji tashi de jang tenda de le sho Sanje Chodan Zoji Jonan La Janjo Bado Dani Jazuji Dagi Juji Jibe Sonanji Dola Benja Sanje Dubasho Sanje Chodan Zoji Jonan La Janjo Bado Dani Jazuji Dagi Juji Jibe Sonanji Dola Benja Sanje Dubasho Sanje Chodan Zoji Jonan La Janjo Bado Dani Jazuji Dagi Juji Jibe Sonanji Dola Benja Sanje Dubasho. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. If you are attached to this life, you are not a spiritual practitioner. If you are attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you are attached to your own self-interest, you have no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. And let's go ahead and read from Lama Tsongkhapa's Source of All My Good. This is the basis of the teaching from which we've been, the basis of the teaching we're giving. We've reached the section on the supreme scope or supreme capacity, which is, I guess, synonymous with the great vehicle. The teachings for beings of supreme capacity, the great vehicle teachings, the entrance to the great vehicle, the entrance to the Mahayana, of course, we know is bodhicitta. So because we've entered into the supreme capacity teachings, we know that the supreme capacity teachings are dependent upon the teachings shared in common with beings of small and medium capacity, as I kind of hammered on this evening. But we know that that entrance to the Mahayana doesn't just happen because we decide we would like to do that. We have to, let me prove I'm not a robot first. No, I'm not a robot. I'm a mind possessor. I am. I have that. I have a mind. So bodhicitta doesn't just happen. I think that's where I was at, and it's something that's caused. So we've come to the part in this text where we see that we have a big problem on our hands called samsara, and it's disgusting. And now the stanza that we're on says, hey, samsara is disgusting, right? Now look around. It's disgusting for everyone. And everyone has misery, lack of freedom. Oh, may I become a Buddha to be able to not only get rid of my own problems, but help you discover that you have a problem too and how to get rid of it, because we depend on each other, and my final happiness depends upon caring about you. So we're learning how to care about you. I'm learning how to care about you. I'm learning how to care about you because all I've ever known how to do is care about me. And it's gotten me in all these jams over and over again. And all I've ever done is care about me because I believe I intrinsically exist and that makes sense. So I got a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do. And this all gets undone in stages through the small, medium, and great scope. And they all work together if we're looking at it in the Lam Rim perspective, because we always learn all of the stages. We see how this bodhicitta teaching tells us, hey, you better learn more about renunciation. You better learn more about samsara. And then we go back. We go back to the small and medium scope and find out, okay, maybe I don't know enough about samsara to really, really care about yours. If I don't know about mine, how do I care about yours? And yours is the thing that I'm supposed to have compassion about. The source of all my good by Lama Tsongkhapa. Whew. Source of all my good is my kind Lama, my Lord. Bless me first to see that taking myself to them in the proper way is the very root of the path, and grant me then to serve and follow them with all my strength and reverence. Bless me first to realize that the excellent life of leisure I found just this once, like I was saying before in the teaching, like we have it now. There's a sense of urgency. I don't know if I'm going to have it again. It's like a flash of lightning, a virtuous moment's going on. I better, try to put that lightning in a bottle. I better try to harness this, eke it out as much as I can because I'm disintegrating moment by moment. And I've got this thing just this once, and I'm going to die and I don't know when. And when I die, the only thing that's going to help me is the Dharma. I better have a sense of urgency. I've only found it this once, and it's real easy for it to break, and it was hard to get. And I've got it now. Why would I waste it? Bless me to realize the excellent life of leisure I found just this once is hard to find, ever so valuable. Grant me then to wish and never stop to wish that I could take its essence night and day. My body and the life in it are fleeting as the bubbles in the sea froth of a wave. Pop! Bless me first just to recall the death that will destroy me soon, and help me find sure knowledge that after I've died, the things I've done, the white or black, and what those deeds will bring to me, follow always close behind my shadow, as certain as my shadow. Grant me then ever to be careful to stop the slightest wrongs of the many wrongs we do, and try to carry out instead each and every good of the many that we may. This is the base. This is the small scope we're talking about. Imagine if you had this realization where you day and night were only concerned with stopping slightest wrongs and engaging in virtues because of knowing that any moment you can die, and the only thing that you bring with you are those virtues and non-virtues. So it makes no sense to do anything but engage in virtue because you're going to die. You don't know when. You're moving faster than the speed of light to it, and you don't even know it. Moving so fast every moment we're disintegrating. We don't even see it. And why would you be doing anything except making sure, because you know you don't like to feel bad, that you're not gonna? Bless me to perceive all that's wrong with the seemingly good things of this life. How was your day? It was great. No, it wasn't. It was the suffering of change. There are seemingly good things of this life. I can never get enough of them, though, but they can't be trusted. You see the problem? I can't get enough of the bait. Ah, I love them, but it can't be trusted. But I think I can trust the bait. And so does the rat. And then it goes, because it thought it could trust the bait. Yeah, the bear thought it could trust the bait. They can't be trusted. They're the door to every pain I have. It's the door. It keeps me there. Oh, I think I can trust the bait. Let me go on in there. Oh, well, let me stay in there. Let me stay in samsara. This is delicious. Grant me then to strive instead for the happiness of liberation, because that's happiness. What I think is happiness is suffering. Grant that these pure thoughts may lead me to be watchful and recall what I should be doing. Duh. Grant me to make take greatest care to make the Pradamoksha vows the essence of my practice. They're the root of Buddha's teachings. Again, here, this is where we are now. I have slipped and fallen into the sea of this suffering life. Bless me to see that every living being, every one my own mother, has fallen into. So there it is. I've got this mess I know all about, and I'm urgently want to get out of it. Wow, you have a mess. Let me turn this urgency over to wanting to get you out of it. because I will learn that my happiness depends on it. Grant me then to practice the wish for enlightenment, to take on myself the task of freeing them all. Bless me to see clearly that the wish itself isn't enough, for if I'm not well trained in the three moralities, I can't become a Buddha, and grant me then a fierce resolve to master the Bodhisattva vows. Grant that I may quickly gain the union of calm abiding and special insight, one which quiets my mind from being distracted to wrong objects, and the other which analyzes the perfect meaning in the correct way. So wrong objects, objects that are external, when we look at shamatha, and specifically here, wrong objects would be, you want the object of observation to be emptiness of intrinsic existence and it to unite with the calm abiding, this union of calm abiding and special insight. So you want it to be an internal object. Shine is calm abiding. You're calming external distraction and abiding on an internal object. And the internal object in this case that you want to abide on is the internal object, the generic image, when it's conceptual, of the emptiness of intrinsic existence. And eventually, you want to be able to move beyond that generic image and have a yogic direct perception of emptiness where there is no generic image and suchness is perceived directly. But it's in dependence upon the conceptual realization of suchness that the direct realization occurs. Grant that once I practice well the path shared and become a vessel that's worthy, I enter with perfect ease the way of the diamond. Highest of all ways, holiest door to come inside for the fortunate and good. Bless me to know with genuine certainty that when I've entered thus, the cause that gives me both the high attainments is to keep my pledges and my vows most pure. Grant me then always to keep them, even if it costs my life. Bless me next to realize as well as I can the crucial points of both the steps, the essence of the secret ways. Grant me then to practice as the holy ones have spoken, putting all my effort in and never leaving off the practice of the 4 times highest that there is. Bless me, grant me that the spiritual friend who shows me this good road, and all my true companions in this quest of long and fruitful lives, bless and grant me that the rain of obstacles, things within me or outside me that could stop me now, stop and end forever. In all my lives, may I never live apart from perfect lamas. May I bask in the glory of the Dharma. May I fulfill perfectly every good quality of every level and path and reach then quickly the place where I become myself the one who holds the diamond. How do I ensure that this last stanza actually occurs? Am I doing enough in my life? Is there enough urgency in my life to make sure that in all my lives I'm never separated from a qualified teacher? That doesn't just occur. It happened this time. Like it says, I've just this once. I've got it. I've got it. I've got a teacher. I'm here. I have it. What am I doing to make sure that I'm mature enough when I die to be thrust into a position to have another qualified teacher? I don't want this to be like a choppy ride. Samsara is disgusting. I want out. And I want it to not be broken up. I don't want to have to spend a lifetime in my next life as a worm slithering around, grasping at the dung I'm eating, or grasping at the dirt I'm eating, as being intrinsically existent and intrinsically delicious, and not even hearing a word about Dharma or qualified teacher. What am I doing? What do I do today to make sure that I don't think that, like my dogs that go out and eat poop, I don't think that I'm intrinsically existent and the poop's intrinsically existent and intrinsically delicious. And then I just go through my whole life like that. We as humans aren't much better than animals in the respect that we're just always searching for happiness and trying to get rid of suffering. And Lama Tsongkhapa or Umse Agha was saying that animals are actually a lot better at getting rid of, having just temporal happiness and removing suffering. I mean, that's all, they just go for it. What are we going to do that's better than an animal? So what we're going to do is we're going to read a little of the Lamrim Chemo. Um, and this isn't a race. This is just about trying to pull out things that are helpful for us to get bodhicitta, things that I've found helpful, things that I've heard helpful, things that I've been thinking about that I think might be helpful for you. And when I say them out loud and try to articulate them, it reinforces these things in my own mind. And that's really why I'm here this evening, is to reinforce this in my own mind and try to accumulate merit with the motivation of trying to in some way be of benefit to others, not knowing who those are. But I wouldn't be, I'm giving this teaching for that multi-purpose. Like I really, really want to realize these things. And I know that this is the way fast track to doing that. But I want you to be benefited as well. And I know that's the fast track to me um, getting anywhere. So, anyway, we were talking about obstacles to getting bodhicitta last week. We'll only talk for a few minutes this week about it. I guess I got off the hook. I was saying to Lorinda, this is really one of the more difficult sections of the Lamrim Chemo. And everyone just reads through it and says, yeah, 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 yeah. But there's some really, page 54 of the second volume, 53 into 54 of the second volume, and maybe up to 50 into 55, like the last little bit of it. There's some really heavily profound things that are stated here. First, we have to get over this idea that there's an intrinsic difference between self and other. And we see how self and other is just merely a perspective, that this basis of designation here, that I'm saying this is myself, okay? I'm labeling it as me. This is mine. But when you look at me, this same basis of designation is labeled as other. But when you and I both look at blue, it's blue. So there seems to be this concrete feeling that we have about this is self and that's other. But it's nowhere near conventionally as concrete as like, that's blue. You see blue, I see blue. But how is it that this same basis of designation, I see me and you see you? I see self and you see other. When I relate to you, I see other, but when you relate to yourself, you see self. So this same basis of designation, we can say other is imputed in dependence upon a basis of among the 4 or 5 aggregates that serve as a basis of designation. So other is imputed in dependence upon a collection of among the 4 or 5 aggregates that serve as a basis of designation. Self is imputed in dependence upon a collection of among the 4 or 5 aggregates that serve as a basis of designation. The same basis of designation that I feel is self intrinsically, you see as other. There's a flexibility of perspective there that we don't even think about. And the reason is we don't intrinsically exist. There is no intrinsically existent self or intrinsically existent other. It's merely imputed in dependence upon the perspective of the person that is designating it as such. It's a perspective. And then in the Lamrim Chemo, it talks about that's a distant mountain over there. It's the same basis. And then you get over there and you say it's a near mountain. So it's merely a perspective, self and other. So here's a loosening of this idea that there's an intrinsic difference. There's no dependence. There's not an interdependence. There's not mutual benefit. Why I say mutual benefit? Because self can't be posited without other, and other can't be posited without self. We see an interdependence, a mutual benefit that's taking place there that one can't kind of be held on to without depending upon the other. So it's merely a perspective. So this loosening of perspective and recognizing that even though I'm holding on to me as me, this same thing over here you're saying is you, but blue's not like that. I wouldn't say you see blue and I see, unless you're colorblind. I mean valid cognition. You see blue, I see yellow. No, blue's blue. So there's something even conventionally awry here. We're not saying we're both, empty. We're not just going right to the ultimate. We're saying there's something awry here if conventionally this kind of talk can happen. And ultimately, there's no intrinsic existence. Fine. And it starts with this, there's no essential difference. There's no intrinsic difference. Lama Tsongkhapa says it here, and then concludes that that relation to that thus Shantideva indicates that self and other are merely posited in relation to a particular reference point and do not essentially exist, do not intrinsically exist. It's merely a point of reference from which you can merely impute this thing in dependence upon a collection. You wouldn't say that the table's another person, because you need there's not the collection of things that are suitable to be labeled as a person, like a person, like an actual person over there. So there's a dependence that's taking place. So Bodhisattva Shantideva tells us all about that. And then quotes the Compendium of Trainings, which is his own text, which is a compilation of a lot of sutras. It's a kind of read along you'll find with the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. And now the next thing that Lama Tsongkhapa is going to get into that says you have to remove the obstacle of thinking is that thinking that there's this just difference, such a difference between self and other. And since they're different, it doesn't make any sense for me to care about your suffering because your suffering doesn't affect me, and for you to care about my suffering because my suffering doesn't affect you. So Bodhisattva Shantideva gives some conventional reasoning here to show us that, yeah, that doesn't even, we do all kinds of stuff all the time uh, to help things that are different than us. And like, for instance, our hand will take a thorn out of our foot. Our hand and our foot are different, but there's dependence there. There's an interdependence there, the collection and so forth. But my hand and my foot are different. But when I have a thorn in my foot, it makes sense, even though they're different, for my hand to take the thorn out. And then Lama Tsongkhapa, I'll wrap up in a second. Lama Tsongkhapa says, just because when you're old, that's a different person in terms of the moments. You don't have gray hair if you're 20. It's funny, when I read this, I was thinking, yeah, I'm young. When I'm old, and I'm thinking, Jeff, you're pretty old. You're pretty old. So I was thinking, like, so there is a difference between the Jeff that'll be older and the Jeff that's now. And if it doesn't make any sense for something that's different to try to benefit something else, then it wouldn't make sense for me to save any money for my old age. I should just spend it all now, because it's a different person later that is going to reap the benefits of it. I shouldn't eat food in the morning, so that the Jeff isn't hungry at 11, because wouldn't matter. You see how it's saying like this. It's making these kind of absurd conclusions. We like to use absurd conclusions so it can get you to shake up your thinking. Like you're all always doing like old age and youth, and now what about future and past lives? So you shouldn't do anything like virtuous now, because it's in your next life you're going to be a totally different person. Same continuum, but a different person. It doesn't make sense, right? So anyway, there's just a whole lot of reasonings that are given to show that, yeah, you're willing to have something different decide that it makes sense to help something other than itself. And that it can make sense because of this dependence, because of the interdependence. It makes sense for you to then care about others the way that your hand cares about your foot, the way that it's not okay for you to say, I'm different than you, so it doesn't make sense for me to care about you, because then it wouldn't make sense for me to save money for my old age. It wouldn't make sense to make sure I buy groceries for tomorrow. This is what the Lama Tsongkhapa is saying. Minyak Kunsan Sunam goes on and on and on and on and on, because this part is hard. And you come to this conclusion, you have to come to a conclusion that it makes sense to remove sentient beings suffering because they're suffering and they're sentient beings. And suffering is unnecessary. And sentient beings want happiness. It's the same happiness that you're looking for, the same lack of suffering that you're looking for in a generality. So because sentient beings want happiness, you're just a whole part of a whole called sentient beings. Wouldn't it make sense to remove the suffering? There's a lot of really deep, deep points that are put in here that are going to require us, I would say, probably to get through this little part in here. I read hours of information this afternoon about it, and the week before and the week I've been reading a lot of pulling every book on lojong out to try to really nail this section down. This what's going to keep me from being able to do this practice of equalizing and exchanging self with others. And this, I'm telling you, you could do a year-long teaching on page 53 to the top of 55. It's really wild. And some of the texts don't even get into this no intrinsic difference in emptiness at all. They just say everybody wants to be happy and everyone wants to be free from suffering. Everyone's equally important. They don't get into this emptiness part until later. When we look at the way to explain the 7-point thought transformation by Geshe Chikawa, sometimes it's explained with ultimate truth first, ultimate bodhicitta and then conventional, and sometimes conventional and then ultimate, because we're moving, around within the lines of this kind of ultimate bodhicitta when we're talking about this idea of there's not this self that intrinsically exists to care for as a basis for the self-cherishing attitude to make so much sense out of being a jerk. So anyway, let's end there. I went over a little minute. This is all just so enjoyable for me. If there were listeners and I could just go on for the next 10 hours, I really feel like I would love to do that, because this information is information that matters so much. And we, generally speaking, don't hear much about anything that will help us. We hear a lot about how to make us have the suffering of change. And we seek it out. Boy, we seek the suffering of change out. And the more we can seek the abandonment of the pervasive conditioned suffering out and seek what is driving everything, then we're making headway. Okay. We try our best, right? Nobody's perfect. Ling Rinpoche, the senior tutor of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, gives an entire bodhicitta teaching and says, if you can put a dent in your self-cherishing attitude, my work was complete. He doesn't say, if you become a bodhisattva, my work was complete. If you put a dent in your self-cherishing attitude, like a dent, because no one does, the world will become a million times better that moment than it was before you did it. And that seems hard to believe, but the world consists of human beings and non-human beings, but in terms of the human race, it's an entity. And when that entity has part of it start to question cherishing itself, has an individual within that entity start to question whether cherishing itself, oneself, makes sense or not, that entire entity becomes better because of the interdependence and the connectedness that we all have with one another, and the vibration, quantum entanglement, whatever you want to call it, the vibration is like a rippling earthquake that goes across all of humanity when we make slight movements towards Buddhahood. Slight movements improves the whole human race. No pressure. Concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. Fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. Imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I've collected for the benefit of the teachings of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, Precious Guru, any mistakes that I made, may they be purified by the Vajrasattva mantra. Om Benzo Sata Zamaya Manu Balaya Benzo Sata Zeno Vajita Dida Meva Zudogaya Meva Zubogaya Meva Nuratu Meva Zava Zidi Mepracha Sava Gamazuja Megidam Jian Guru Maha Bhagavan Zava Dada Benzama Mungo Benzama Manzamaya Zava Om Ve Jorama 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 Jinjagala Raja Morama Jadaji Ginger Hong Jo Hong. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri, and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors, traverse the 3 times. I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. May the supreme jewel Bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase forevermore. Through this virtuous action, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead every being without exception into that enlightened state. In all my lives, may I never be separated from my perfect gurus. May I bask in the glory of the Dharma. May I fulfill perfectly every good quality of every level and path, and reach then the place where I become myself the one who holds the diamond, the one who transformed into the reliable guide, motivated by altruism to benefit sentient beings, the teacher, Sugata, and protector. To you, I make prostrations. From my 2 collections, vast as space, that I have amassed from working at this practice for a great length of time, may I become the chief leading Buddha for all those whose minds' wisdom eye is blinded by ignorance. In the heavenly realm of Tibet, surrounded by a chain of snow mountains, you are the source of all benefits and hope for beings. All-powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. A prayer of supplication to Namgyal Khensur Geshe Wangdak Rinpoche, and may also all of these holy lamas, Geshe Dorji Damdul Rinpoche, Umse Agha Rinpoche, Genpo Drapa Rinpoche, and Geshe Geshe Tapke Rinpoche, all of these amazing teachers, Geshe Pendela and Drepung Loseling Atlanta, and Geshe Negila. May all these amazing teachers and other practitioners, they all remain in this world, like Vajra strong in this world. And those who've passed from this world, like Geshe Lobsang, Gonpo Rinpoche, and Demoloch, there's Yansiks now who've passed from this world. If they haven't returned and recognized, may they return swiftly and continue to teach us so that we can get out of this mess. Yeah. And a prayer for Namgyal Khensur Geshe Wangdak Rinpoche, my root teacher, who I feel has just created this pipeline for me of the Dharma, has created this pipeline that Geshe Dorje Damdul sends me teachings through, and Umsala Agha sends me teachings through, and Gen Jeffrey Hopkins sent me teachings through, and even His Holiness the Dalai Lama continues to send teachings through, and it's just all this one big pipeline of goodness that just keeps coming to me because of the kindness of my teacher. Complex Yogi poses as a simple monk. Homage to Namgyal Khensur Geshe Wangdak Rinpoche, our precious spiritual friend who is inseparable from Aryatara. I fully prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food, and music purified by Om 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 Om. The rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you, who placed the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like Lord Atisha, who came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. The teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar for our ears that elucidated the teachings for beings of 3 capacities. Now that sound has stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that all of your teachers passed away and understood the sadness, entreating us to continue our studies. The Buddha doesn't wash away the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations aren't transferred to them. It is by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. If the Buddhas could remove miseries with their hands, or the Buddhas could transfer realizations, or just wash us off, there would be no more sentient beings. There would only be Buddhas, because Buddha's sole purpose is to make other beings Buddhas. So even the Buddha has the handicap of not being able to just be omnipotent and change our world. But the Buddha can come and tell us exactly what we need to hear to change our world. And this is how we become liberated. And may our teachers never stop coming to tell us how to change our world. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. The sadness in our hearts would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world and take care of us in all of our lives, wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts and crowns. May all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness so they know who you really are. Thank you so much, everyone, for your patience, your kindness. I can't say enough about how much it means to me. And hopefully, as we're moving a million miles an hour and don't know it towards our next life, we'll not have this one end before next week, and we'll see all of us each other again. But who knows if we'll see each other again, because we're like a water bubble that's so fragile. And this information that I'm sharing with you that was so freely shared to me may not be information that's so free in your future. So take advantage of this precious human rebirth that we have now and recognize that it can be lost very, very easily. And now is the time to practice Dharma. As Guntan Dembe Drome says, take every moment you can and push a virtuous imprint into your mind. See you around. I hope.